right, welcome to episode 2 of the Tank Me Later podcast. My name is Noah Rubin, and today I'm joined by a dynasty legend, one of the biggest names in the dynasty basketball space, Sports Ethos own Rhett Bauer, host of the Punt Intended podcast. Rhett, how are you doing this? I think it's still evening for you as well. So how are you doing this
It
evening?
is, yes, it is evening, and I'm doing well. I'm a little bit blushing over here with that introduction, but I appreciate it, and I'm excited to dive into some dynasty stuff as always.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I wanted to make sure, I was kind of dividing up, going by teams based on lottery odds, trying to go in order a little bit. I wanted you on the Pacers episode. I knew I needed you on the Pacers episode with how in depth I've seen you both on Twitter and on your podcast go. I'm excited to get all the details I'll probably learn quite a bit just from this episode. So I'm excited about that. But to start off, let's talk about how you got into fantasy, I guess sports in general, kind of some content creation, dynasty. Like, tell me a little bit about your background with that.
Yeah, so I started playing Dynasty, I think like 8 years ago now. Been playing fantasy football since I was like 5. And so I was very familiar with the idea of like fantasy sports. And then I was at some sort of school for my military stuff, and somebody asked me to join a fantasy basketball league. And I grew up, my dad was a huge proponent of give every NBA team 100 points and let them play for 2 minutes. And so we did not watch a lot of NBA basketball growing up unless it was the playoffs. And so by the time, like when I started doing fantasy basketball, I think it was like an 8-team Yahoo league for points. And I obviously I had no idea what I was doing. I took Jokic 7th without knowing who he was.
It's not
And
bad.
and he was the best player in the league that year. So I was like, all right, that'll work. And then I started, we were talking about this before we got on. I started negotiating with some people and ended up fleecing a bunch of guys. And was like, wait, this is kind of fun, taking a bunch of good players for Chris Dunn and Torian Prince. And so being able to do stuff like that. And then obviously once I got into fantasy basketball, I found Josh Lloyd's podcast and then started getting into all the resources that come along with that. I think I joined a dynasty league off of Twitter or some forum or something like that, just a bunch of random dudes. And now 7 years later, I'm still in the league with all those guys, and I know more about them than some family members.
That's such an awesome start that you started off. And the first thing you did was not only draft well, but take advantage of, I'm assuming, your friends that you were playing with. So that's a great
They
way
were associates more so, so had no guilt whatsoever. It was the same place, same time, not necessarily a long relationship, so no hard feelings still.
That's fair. That's fair. And 7 years later, still playing with the same people. You said Josh Lloyd's podcast, joining dynasty leagues with random people. How did you get into, I guess, starting with either your podcast or with Sports Ethos, or I don't know if you wrote anywhere else before that?
So I wrote for 8 points 9 seconds, the Pacers fan-sided site, for a little while. When my family and we moved from Indiana to Colorado in the summer of 2020, I had a job that required me to go into the office, but into specific areas that I didn't have the permissions to go into yet. So It was also in the middle of COVID. So I did a lot of remote work. And remote work, when you're supposed to be doing stuff in a specific place, means no work. So I had a ton of time on my hands. And so I ended up getting, like I said, I was already playing fantasy basketball. Cousin Travis, the co-host of Pun Intended, we talked about it constantly. And so I started getting into some Pacers stuff and looking at it like, hey, this is pretty easy. Just watch the games because I don't have work to do. And then obviously doing so much dynasty stuff on my own. I don't remember how I got connected with Dan Bespris from Sports Ethos Hoopball at the time. And I just reached out and was like, hey, so I don't know if you guys have anything for Dynasty, but the last piece that the Google result pops up was updated in 2017. So if you're looking for somebody to contribute to that, I would be more than happy to do so. And so I did. I started blurbing, got pretty involved there, and then had to take a little bit of a step back because I was doing way too much. But now we're just rolling along with the podcast, the Dynasty rankings, some articles here and there, and then actually bringing on a couple more people. So I'm excited to kind of edit / manage that. It sounds way more official than what I think it'll be, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome that you're able to get your start just by reaching out. I think that's something that a lot of people could definitely kind of replicate in a way. I'm not saying that they'll be as good as the pun intended, that it's something that you can just, you're putting yourself out there, making your own content. I think that's just an awesome kind of backstory. You said you didn't really grow up watching much basketball. But
I mean, I played basketball constantly.
okay.
Like played a ton. Like I think it was all throughout middle school, high school, after high school. In college, I was waking up at like 4 to play like for like 3 hours before any sort of classes or anything like that.
I love that.
I can't do that anymore. But yeah, so basketball has always been in my life. But as far as watching it goes, like obviously March Madness was huge because that's just chaos, and then NBA playoffs was also huge because that's like I was like that's when they're trying, like that's the good basketball because people are actually playing defense. And so yeah, wasn't like a diehard invested in the NBA growing up, but then it was pretty easy to transition into really tracking things once I got rolling.
Yeah. So I grew up about an hour outside of Atlanta. So as a Hawks fan, I can remember my first Hawks game was actually against the Pacers. They were hosting them. So it was, I want to say Danny Granger was on the team. I want to say Mike Dunleavy. I can't remember anybody else because it was the Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, Al Horford Hawks. But I was kind of curious. That out. Yeah. What's your, I guess, kind of earliest memory as a Pacers fan? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, I think my earliest memory was the 2000 finals. I don't know if it was 99 or 2000 or 2001, but whenever the Pacers made the finals, obviously, like I said, we watched playoff basketball, and hey, all of a sudden there was a lot of playoff basketball for the Pacers. So watched that. I remember my dad showing me a lot of like when it would be the anniversary of the 8 points 9 seconds for Reggie Miller that would pop up on SportsCenter. If we missed it the first go around, we'd have to watch SportsCenter later that night to be like, hey, here's this, because stuff like YouTube and Twitter wasn't nearly as popular, and definitely wasn't popular in my house. So and then there was always stuff like Tracy McGrady scoring his 7 points or whatever it was in his 11 seconds against the Spurs or whatever. So like the huge stuff like that was always pretty big. But then I think like my memory thing that I could speak to would probably just be the series against the Heat. In 2013-14 when Paul George was ascending like that. And I remember arguing, it's like, man, is he the third best wing in the league? And that wasn't crazy at the time. No. It was just a bit optimistic. So yeah.
Yeah, I get it as like a homer. You're always a little bit more optimistic about your players. And it's funny with the Reggie Miller. So I grew up a Hawks fan, but my dad was from New York, grew up a Knicks fan. So it was kind of the opposite opposite mindset on the 8 points 9 seconds. I remember watching the 30 for 30 on that. That was he didn't have as good of memories, I'm sure, as you and your dad did. But
yeah, you got to have the TV off those days. You're not having any flashbacks.
Not at all. So let's talk some dynasty. You know, if you were going into a dynasty startup draft, what's kind of your strategy just in general? Are you looking, I know you always have to kind of consider ages. Are you going all in? Are you going super young? just what's kind of your general strategy?
Yeah, so I think it really depends on league size. I started in a 12 team and then started the pun intended 30 team because I was like, all right, y'all keep talking about these 30 team leagues and there's just dudes all over the 12 team. Everybody's trying to consolidate. Nobody can pull it off. So my philosophy kind of, like I said, it depends on the size of the league. In 30 teams, I'm finding that you have to be well balanced, like percentages wise. I think punting 1% in a 30 team can be very, very dangerous because more often than not, like if you punt field goal percentage, you're relying on volume stats. So like you're going to be relying on threes, points, assists, steals. Obviously you're probably throwing turnovers then too, and probably not getting very many rebounds and blocks. So then like if you have one stud go out, like you're not going to be able to compete with the best teams in the league at volume, and you've already handed them at least 2 categories. So in deep leagues, it kind of pays off to be well-rounded. Even if you won't be able to beat every team head to head every time, you set yourself up to be able to insulate yourself with injuries. Like if you have good field goal percentage, good free throw percentage, then you lose Jaden McDaniels because he punches a wall. Like you can at least, if that were to happen, then you can say that like you won't take a huge hit. Whereas if you lose somebody in the same range, like a Christian Wood or like a Yusuf Nurkic in the same range, where you're like clearly punting threes and free throw, that's a much bigger drop off from that to your replacement player in terms of the categories you care about. But when it comes to drafting, I'm almost always trying to stay like 22 to 27 ish. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm almost like in startup drafts, I'm almost never taking a rookie as one of my top like 6-ish players, depending on league size. Like in a 30 team, I'm going to have a starting lineup of guys that I know contribute right now before I even consider taking prospects. Like, and then in the later rounds, you're going to get guys like Brook Lopez in the 220s, like I did in one of these startups, and then you're going to be killing it. And then you got guys like Bojan Bogdanovic later in the 200s. So like you can find value with the vets late, and everybody's trying to reach for all the young fellas. And so you get guys in the middle of their prime, like guys like Zach LaVine. I don't like Zach LaVine very much, but he just slides so much in dynasty startups relative to his productions. But in the smaller leagues, when you know, like, okay, if I make this pick, I have like 16 until I'm back up rather than 60. Like in a 30 team, you can be a bit more aggressive going after your guys. And I definitely have a lot of fun rostering my guys. So I definitely am a huge proponent of that.
Yeah, the Dynasty 30 was my first, I guess my only Dynasty startup 30 team. Just kind of was giving it my best. But
yeah,
because in my 12 team league I have with, friends from college, I enacted the strongest tank possible. I mean, with my startup, I don't think it was too outrageous, but I pretty quickly made a lot of trades, some good, some looking back were very, very bad, to acquire as many picks as possible and just get a bunch of young guys. Super fun, worked out well. 30 team, I'll let you know, because obviously you have Robert Williams from me now. I traded away Benedict Mathurin as well, which I think you have him as well now.
I now roster him, but you did not trade him to me right off the bat.
So I got a bunch of extra firsts that'll probably be – actually, I think they are really late first, but hopefully it was enough to help me get an early lottery pick. But, yeah, with the Dynasty 30, I was looking at your roster earlier. I believe you made the playoffs. I didn't see – how far did you end up making it?
I won the first round and then lost the second, I think, to Jason. I need to double check that because I don't actually know for sure exactly how far I made it. I just did pun intended today talking about how far I made it, and now I can't even remember. But I know that I was like 13th in the regular season. I think I ended up 8th as far as like where you lose in the bracket. But Jason's team is ridiculous, and I had 3 minutes of Mathurin, 1 game of Robert Williams out of 4, and then 1 game or 2 games of Booker out of 3. So I had absolutely no chance, absolutely none. When I was so short on games played.
Yeah, I'm looking at his team. He's got Dame, Brandon Ingram, Kristaps, and I don't even need to mention anybody else. He had those 3 in a 30 team. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it first season didn't go as super well for me, but it kind of went the way I wanted it. I think I have the 4th best odds at Wemby.
Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4,
and then some late picks from other people, but
yeah. No, I remember when you put out the call for, you said that your guys were available looking for picks. Yeah. I was actually driving at the time, and I was driving with my wife and my 3 kids at the time. I wasn't like doing everything while I was driving, but I told her, right. I was like, hey, like I'm going to need you to get into Fantrax and follow my instructions very clearly because I am not going to miss out on this. And she was so annoyed because I was being very specific, and I was like, okay, the 23 hit the plus, the 25 hit the plus, and then find R. Williams and hit the plus, and then hit submit.
That is okay. One, I'm so glad you weren't just trying to do all this while driving with your whole family, but I think that's so awesome because that sounds exactly like something I would do. Just like making my wife like, hey, can you just like, okay, click this button, make the trade. I think that's so awesome. I'm glad that I was able to take part in that.
Yeah. I don't know how that's about as invested as my wife has been in fantasy so far. Other than all the times taking care of the house and the kids and all that while I do my podcast stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, apologize to her for me because she was annoyed. I didn't want to be a part of her being annoyed, but it was
no, it's fine. It's fine. I got the deal done. That's all that matters.
That's all that matters. Yeah. All right. So let's get into some actual dynasty content. Today we're going to talk about Charlotte, Portland, and Rhett's own Indiana Pacers, but we'll save the best for last. We'll start with Charlotte because I feel like there's probably only like a handful of guys worth talking about. But we'll start with, I guess, kind of how they did this season. They have the fourth best odds in the lottery. So actually, for the Dynasty 30, I kind of hope they win the lottery because then that'd be my pick. But yeah, they went 27 and 55. We're basically locked into the fourth spot for the last few weeks of the season, which made them play Theo Maladon and Svi, a bunch of other people I don't know how to pronounce their names. The last few weeks of the season, which was fun for silly season. But for Dynasty, they only have a handful of guys, namely LaMelo Ball, who's kind of a lost season for him, spent over half of it injured, but I think still widely considered one of the best Dynasty assets. Rhett, if you were doing a startup draft today that included rookies, how early would you take LaMelo?
I think LaMelo is still pretty firmly a top 3 dynasty asset. I think he's still third for me. He is just the counting stats he's been able to put up in a role that I think is sustainable regardless of what team he's on because he does play so fast. He's an aggressive rebounder. Obviously, he's going to get a ton of assists and he plays passing lanes very well. His field goal percentage is not great, but his free throw percentage is up and his threes are also up. And so those were kind of the question marks we had coming into his NBA career. But now that he's doing that stuff, like young guards who can get like 27 and 7 with a steal and a half at 21 and a half years old, I will go ahead and take that. Yeah.
Okay, so you said top 3.
Yep.
I'm just curious, what are your top 3 then? I need to know.
I think it's Jokic, Doncic, and LaMelo. I think those are my 3.
All right, so I was probably going to wait till later to ask this, but now I need to ask now that we're talking about this. Wemby. I know it probably depends. There's a difference between him going to Houston versus San Antonio versus Utah, but just generally speaking, drafting the player, how early are you taking him?
I think he probably should go at like 4, honestly.
Okay.
Like I do such a hard time. I have such a hard time with drafting rookies and knowing how to value them because I almost never get them because other people overvalue them. Like the last 3 years in all of my dynasty leagues, I have not made a first round pick. I have traded all of them and they've all been fantastic trades. I just traded 1.5 or the 5th best odds for Terry Rozier, Jabari Smith, a 23 and a 24 late first. Like, yes, I will go ahead and take that. And I'm going to be good next year. So yes, give me the 3rd best prospect from this year and Terry Rozier on top of late firsts. And then there was another one, 7th best odds. I traded for OG Anunoby, DeLon Wright, and Aaron Gordon, which got me the championship in my 12-team league. So like, that's not like a great trade on the front end, but it worked out. It worked out. Yeah. Another one I got Pascal Siakam, Malcolm Brogdon, which I turned into Anthony Davis. And so it's just like I've had such good success with people just blowing their minds, blowing their assets on these unknown mystery box picks that I don't know how to properly value these rookies because I almost never have a shot at them.
Yeah, I'm the sucker that trades away everything good for picks. So yeah, I'm the one who makes the bad trades. So
No, you don't know they're bad yet because you haven't gotten any of your
looking
picks.
back, looking back,
Okay,
they were
fair,
bad.
fair, fair. I was
Yeah.
just trying to help. That's all.
No, I appreciate the positive reinforcement. I'm just gonna be honest and vulnerable and say they were bad trades. But because they made my team bad, I guess it in turn helped me get good players. And anyways, that's the beauty of Dynasty. You can either win or just say that you were bad enough to help your team next year. You can't ever really have a bad season. So
Yeah, exactly. As long as you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish, I think that's the bar that everybody gets measured by. Which shout out Washington Wizards for being routinely mediocre, and that's exactly where they want to be.
yeah, I don't know why they don't either. They need to blow it up at this point. But staying on Charlotte, Mark Williams was able to finally be kind of unleashed after they traded away Plumlee. Had a great run for a nice little portion of games before they kind of started messing with the rotations a little bit, not playing him nearly as much down the stretch. Assuming they don't end up with Victor Wembanyama, he should start at center next season. How do you kind of see that working out with him as the starter, playing alongside a healthy Hornets team that adds in another lottery pick, maybe another free agent or something to play alongside like LaMelo, Rozier, Oubre? How, if the Hornets are, I guess, more competitive than they were this season, how do you see Mark Williams doing in that system?
Yeah, I mean, Steve Clifford, if he's still the coach there, he demands defensive competency from all of his players, or you're just not going to play. And I think that's hard to do for a young big, but he kind of came in and did it. Like for a team that was bad, he did a lot of really, really good things. And as far as Wembanyama goes, and this entire year in general, honestly, I am not worried about Mark Williams' role at all. I actually bumped him up. He was one of the biggest risers of this last iteration of my dynasty rankings because if they get Wembanyama, they're going to play him at the 4 because Mark Williams has the heft that they can just throw around at the bigs, and that's one of their draft picks from last year. So like you're just put them together and see what happens and do some data gathering. But like as far as fantasy value goes, obviously his field goal percentage is going to be elite. You're not going to get any threes, and your free throw percentage is going to be rough. But the boards are there, the blocks are there. I think we saw him pass at Duke a little bit, but it'll just be really, really interesting to see how he plays with LaMelo and how many shots there are for this team. Because if Oubre is gone and they do something with Terry, like that's 40 shots that just opened up just about. And so there's going to be a chance that there's some volume to go around. Not to mention the idea of LaMelo feeding Mark Williams some very easy baskets in a way that we've seen bigs like DeAndre Ayton, like. I think Ayton's obviously a lot better, but just walked in and is just getting bucket after bucket after bucket just by being open and being massive. And Mark Williams has those down.
Yeah. And then with the other center there in Nick Richards, we saw him see a little bit down the stretch, probably as the starting over Mark Williams. I guess he's probably able to make more of an impact in a 30-team dynasty league. Is he a guy, like, how do you kind of value him in his situation there?
Yeah, I think him extending in Charlotte is a good deal for next year. Just because, like I said, they're gonna play their guys, and if Charlotte likes him enough to extend him, then that that it could be worse. He had a decent run earlier this year. I know a lot of people were psyched about him and was thinking he might be the center of the future, which made no sense when they drafted the center of the future earlier that season. But he is a guy in a 30-team league that's just going to come in, do his job, not really hurt you anywhere other than threes, and him being on a bad team like Charlotte with a young big ahead of him, there's a chance that there's some foul trouble. And so a guy like Nick Richards could actually end up being a pretty good contributor for a deep league. But I don't know if I would be going out of my way to roster him if my league didn't have like 200 something players in it, because I just don't see him being like a long-term rotation, like firmly in the rotation big, as much as like a 15 to 20-ish minute, depending on injuries, sort of big.
Yeah, and then of course the caveat of Victor Wembanyama. Of course, just derails
Yes.
probably any minutes because they probably start at the 4, just have this incredible young twin towers for 15 years. But if they're taking Williams off the floor, slide Wemby to the 5, just because you can have this 7-4 stretch 5 that can dribble. You might as well use him there. So
Yes, just put him wherever. It'll be fine.
yeah. And then one more Charlotte player, Terry Rozier, barely finished inside the top 100 in 9-cat formats last season. After finishing, according to Basketball Monster, 30th the year before and 38th the year before that, his shooting percentage was awful. If I remember correctly, it was kind of okay when he was playing with LaMelo and then just atrocious when he was playing without LaMelo. Is he a guy that could be a bounce back candidate next season, assuming that LaMelo's back playing alongside him?
I think he will bounce back in some capacity, but I also would be kind of surprised if he's still on the Hornets. So I don't think he's going to be that bad from the field again. I don't imagine he's going to ever be a positive, but I think 41% from the field on 19 shots a game is just a bit much for him. But obviously, like we said with Mark Williams and with everybody, honestly, LaMelo just makes everybody's life easier. But the Hornets are going in a direction which they might end up with a guy like it's a good option, a Brandon Miller, and then all of a sudden, are you really going to have Terry Rozier out there to take his 19 shots a game? No, you're not. Are you going to have him out there for his 16 shots a game? Still, probably no. And with the chance that I don't know how much weight to put into this, but the chance that Michael Jordan sells the team, if a new owner comes in, like, is Gordon Hayward going to be on the team? Terry Rozier? Like, I don't know. So I know I just bought Terry Rozier in a 30-team league, so I'm kind of doing what I'm telling other people not to do, but I don't know if I would be buying Terry Rozier too much, other than the fact that I think his field goal percentage just will go up. And we know it's kind of difficult to get guys that can get 19, 4 and 4 with over a steal and a huge bucket of threes.
Yeah. And then, you have his 19 shots. And like you mentioned before, you have Kelly Oubre's 17 shots. So are they really wanting these guys taking all the shots when you have potentially, another, I think the worst they can pick is 8, if I'm not mistaken. I think that's how it works. Yeah, something like that. So one of those guys coming in, potentially like a Brandon Miller, like you said, you're probably going to want to look to get LaMelo and Brandon Miller far more shots. But yeah, we'll see how the lottery goes for them to see kind of who they can add. And hopefully after getting embarrassed in the play-in back-to-back seasons and then picking 4th, maybe it'll probably be like a little bit of a longer rebuild, but
it is so Charlotte for them to have locked up the 4th best odds, like with 15, 20 games to go. Like they weren't even trying to be that bad. They just ended up that bad, but we're still good enough to not actually be able to creep into the top 3. It's absolutely incredible.
And yeah, and then they'll slip. They'll get pick 7, take somebody that's going to end up being a bust, and then poor LaMelo's going to ask out 2 seasons. 2 seasons.
Oh, I've been saying that the ink won't even dry on his contract extension. Like he'll just be writing in cursive, LaMelo Ball. Also, I want out. Like it'll just be at the top of the contract in one sentence, one unbreakable line. It'll be awesome.
That would be absolutely legendary. But if we can move to Portland, because they're so fun to talk about, and I think earlier today when we're recording this, Damian Lillard said in an exit interview that he's not interested in a 2 to 3 year rebuild. He's not interested in adding another lottery pick. And I think they said that if they don't get the first pick, that they're going to be shopping it. I don't know if that's speculation or them saying that. But you got, they have the 5th best odds to pick Wembanyama. And then they have Dame, they have Jeremy Grant, Anthony Simons, Nurkic, and I guess they have Thibault, Cam Reddish, Shaden Sharp, a couple other guys that really didn't pan out with their previous teams that are kind of getting a shot at redemption. Really, it's Dame. So I don't know. Do you think that Dame runs it back with Portland? They run it back with this kind of similar group, maybe make another trade to try and bring in somebody competitive? What do you think?
If you look at this team on paper, it should have been so much better than what it was. And like I know, like I'm looking at it right now. So Grant missed 20 games. Okay, actually, let me pause there. They missed 20 games, but that's because they sat out for the last 10 that Portland
Exactly.
sat them out for. So they missed 10 games. 10 games of Grant, 10 games of Simon, about 12 to 15 games of Dame, and then Nurk missing 30/20 that you can pretty much just count on. I don't know how you play those guys that many, and they're all playing 35 minutes a game. At least the three studs are. How are you that bad? But I don't know. I don't see what Portland can do with the assets that they have that they'll want to move. Like I don't think they're going to move Shaden Sharp. I don't think they can get a player with enough of an upside and contractual like control to trade Shaden Sharp and make it worth it after what we've seen from him this last couple of weeks. Like I doubt they would trade Shaden Sharp for Jaylen Brown. And I don't know if I would do that either if I was them. Like if he makes all NBA and you can extend him, that's a very different conversation. But right now, if he's heading into unrestricted free agency in the summer of 2024, that's a huge piece to send for a guy in Jaylen who would fill a need for them and make them obviously way better. But the contractual stuff is just so sketchy. And so you're just kind of looking at it, and you want to talk about a deal that was bad immediately is Yusuf Nurkic. They have him for 3 more years and he just can't stay healthy. So what are you doing? Like, is he a positive value on his contract? Probably not. So are you attaching assets to get rid of him? Okay. Then what are you doing to replace that? It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And I believe they have a pick to Chicago that is protected until 2028. And so they can't even trade a bunch of future picks because they owe rolling protections for the next 5 years. And so it's a bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense to me with Portland. And in that vein, like I can see Dame wanting out, but at the same time, I don't he's going to get his no matter what. No matter where he is, he's going to be Dame Lillard. So I'm not too worried about that, but I don't really like where does Dame go? What does this team do? Where do they go?
What's a realistic trade package for Damian Lillard? Like, and does
He's
Portland
got
want a bunch of picks? Do they want to do
yeah,
like kind of like what the Nets did, get a couple players back? It's
I mean, you kind of have to decide right now, right? Because Jeremy Grant, also a free agent right now. So, like, if he walks, you're kind of just toast. Like, if he's gone because he didn't sign an extension, you're kind of just toast. But Dame's got, I think, 4 years, $212 million left on his contract up to age 36, 37 season. I don't know about you, but I don't know about all of that.
that's a very hefty contract. I mean, they really should have blown it up 2 years ago. I think everybody is past the point of like respecting Dame's loyalty in a generation of stars that have no problem asking out, signing elsewhere. You know, guys like Dame and Bradley Beal. It was 2 or 3 years ago. It was like, man, like this is kind of like what NBA players need to do. Like, yeah, they're so loyal. Now it's like, okay, buddy, like we get it, you're loyal. Like we kind of feel bad. Like, why don't you go compete somewhere else? Like these
What
teams
did
are
your
not
team
helping
do
you.
to reward that loyalty besides give you just a mediocre supporting cast?
A competent starting five and not really much depth. I mean, on paper, Portland has a good starting five, but like you
Yes.
said, Kent didn't really stay healthy. And I think they have a little bit more depth now than they did before, but I mean,
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, Sharp stepping up is good. Obviously, Thibault is going to be good. Reddish gave them decent minutes, but like they had Josh Hart. They don't have Josh Hart anymore. And that was
they got 5 seconds.
yes,
That's
yes,
good.
and Reddish. So
And
all those seconds are going to be super valuable when they go to get who I don't know. But yeah, so they do have some depth. They have some interesting players. Like I really like Jabari Walker. He's a guy that I was excited about in the draft, and he went kind of late. But it seems like they'll at least use him a little bit. But other than that, like I just don't know. I don't know. I just don't know what this team does, and it's so hard to project anything about them because you kind of just have to look at what they already have and bank on that being it, other than this pick that they likely end up selecting, because I don't know what they're going to get with it.
Do you package it with the 5 seconds? And I don't know. You don't really have much of a trade package there. But Anthony Simons is a guy that I really like as a scorer. He finished just outside the top 109 cat leagues. He obviously doesn't provide much defensively, doesn't really grab a ton of rebounds. I think he steps up whenever Dame's out, and he's a young player that has like a good future in the league as a 20-point per game scorer. Is he a guy that they could move? Is he a guy that could stick around if Damian Lillard gets traded? I think that they've kind of been at a standstill for a couple seasons now, trying to retool to stay competitive. But I don't know. What do you think about Simon's future? I guess just kind of assuming just Portland stays where they are and just keeps trying to use their can-do attitude.
Yeah, so a couple of guys in some of my leagues are Portland fans, and so I talk to them quite a bit, and they are extremely high on Simons. I remember when he signed his extension for like $25 million a year. He's like, oh, that'll be a steal in a year and a half. And I don't know how I feel about that. But without Damian Lillard this year, I believe Anthony Simons played at like a top 30 level for 9-cat, because it was just insane threes. I think it was 26 points, 5 assists, only like 3 rebounds, but 4.5 threes on 46% from the field, 94 from the line. And that's just, you're just pouring in buckets. I don't think he'll be in a situation where he should garner that many shots, because like, I guess 20 shots a game isn't that crazy in this NBA, but he does have more of a ceiling than what I think Portland allows, because there are guys like Jeremy Grant and Damian Lillard, which obviously command a lot of shots too. So it comes down to sharing the ball. But I think Simons does have a bit more than what he's shown. But again, are they moving Simons? I don't know. Like, what are you going to do that drastically changes the team enough that doesn't involve one of these big salaries that would end up having a similar role on whatever team they go to?
Yeah, and I don't know if this is just my mentality on everything, whether it's fantasy leagues or 2K. If I'm them, I'm blowing everything up and I'm trading away literally everybody. But maybe that's just my mentality that I need to kind of check a little bit. And maybe they can.
That's
Maybe
too
they
late
can make
to
a
check it
couple
now. You
moves.
already started.
That's true. I mean, listen, they've been trying to retool. Like, they made the conference finals and then
Yeah.
tried to retool a couple.
That's one of the
seasons in a
worst
row.
things that can happen to a team. And I actually wrote about that, about the Pacers and how they should look back before looking forward and like crawl, walk, run, because the Hawks making the Eastern Conference Finals before they were ready and deciding not to do anything screwed them over. The Knicks thinking they were good despite overachieving. Like, if you overachieve, that means you did a lot better than what people thought. So like, you should probably factor that into the equation. Portland making the Western Conference Finals is a very similar thing, where it was just the chips falling just right. You're not actually a Western Conference Finals team, and they acted like they were, and now here they are.
Yeah, that definitely hits home with the Hawks making that conference
Sorry.
finals run, which was so much fun. And the next season, just getting destroyed by the Heat in the first round wasn't as much fun. So it's okay. Now we'll get destroyed by Milwaukee in the first round this year. All right.
That's assuming you make it there.
Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of already in my
You
mind.
just did Milwaukee, so that they'd have to win the second game. Okay.
I can't be that negative about. I'm assuming we're losing to Miami. I'm hoping that we beat Toronto/Chicago. I think we can do that.
Yeah.
So in my mind, it's, if we're lucky, 5 games and we're out against Milwaukee. I'm mentally prepared. But we'll move on to talk about your Pacers, who have I think right now they're tied with Washington for the 7th best odds. I believe that'll be some sort of coin flip to figure that out. But they 35-47 were a playoff team. Like, I think at least would have been in the play-in had Tyrese Halliburton stayed healthy. But that's a fantasy superstar right there. How did you think Halliburton? I mean, he finished 8th according to Basketball Monster. Did you see him being that good this year?
I saw him being excellent, and obviously that level of assist was just going to be floating his value to an insane degree anyways, but I did not see him being a 20-point per game scorer. I actually said before the year that I would not be surprised if Mathurin or Duarte would score 20 points a game for a season before Halliburton would, because I just did not see that self-creation. He shot off the dribble like he was creating for himself in a way that I don't think, like, I was trying to temper expectations, but I also just didn't see it with him this early. But goodness gracious, that was to be able to score 21 points a game on 49% from the field and 87% from the line, 10 and a half assists for 2.5 turnovers. That is fantasy gold right there. Absolutely insane.
Yeah, and how old is he? Like 21?
He is 22, I believe.
22.
Let me see. I got it pulled up here. Yeah, he just turned 23.
Okay, so yeah, incredibly young, face of the franchise, adding in another lottery pick. I guess I'll ask the same question. How early would you take him in a dynasty startup?
I have him 5 right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I have right now my top 5 goes Jokic, Luka, LaMelo, Tatum, Halliburton, and then SGA, Edwards right after that. So that's 7.
okay.
And that obviously doesn't include the current rookies because Wembanyama's not in there. But
Right.
I just think with Halliburton, he doesn't rely on, like, obviously he gets 1.6 steals, but that's like reasonable, right? Like that's not a crazy number. So it's not like he's getting like a DeJounte Murray where you're getting like 1.8 steals and just floating your value into an insane degree. So I think that is extremely sustainable and also leaves room for growth in a way that is very exciting moving forward, especially when he's only, quote unquote, only playing 33 and a half minutes a game. So there's even some boosts that can come from that once the Pacers start being good, which will likely, I shouldn't say be good. They will try to be good next year. But once they actually get good, whether that's next year or the following, I can imagine him closer to 36 minutes and even bumping these numbers up a little bit.
And that 1.6 steals per game, I think was actually, so OG Anunoby 1.9, and then DeLon Wright, Jimmy Butler, Fred VanVleet 1.8, and then SGA, Melton, Halliburton, Anthony Edwards, Gary Trent, and Herb Jones 1.6. So it was, I mean, I know it's been higher in the past, but that was among the league leaders. And then obviously 3 threes, 2010, efficient, fantasy king. King.
Without a doubt. Shout out Zach Hinshew, who took him at like 6 in a just a regular, like a redraft league. I gave him a lot of flack for it, but he was right because I believe in totals. Halliburton, well, I guess the end of the year didn't help there. He was 9th for totals as well, so that's not a crazy pick.
Yeah, he may have taken him as early as 3. I wouldn't have been surprised at all. I don't know if he wrote a whole column, 3,000 words about how much he just loved Tyrese Halliburton. I was like, man, I thought I was biased towards my guys, but I respect.
He had me as a Pacers fan be like, "Yo, you need to calm down." Like, I don't know. When you got the homers thinking that you're a little bit too aggressive, I don't know.
But with other Pacers guys, obviously Halliburton's the best fantasy asset, but Miles Turner, top 20 season. I guess he was 25 the year before, or 13 the year before that. Is he sticking around in Indiana? I mean, he's been on the trade block for like his entire career.
Yeah, I think he is, at least for the next 2 years. Obviously, renegotiate and extend gave him a $17 million raise this year and then extended for 2 more years on top of that, descending. So I think you can say for sure next year he will be here. And then the following year, it'll depend on how good the team is because he'll be entering unrestricted free agency again, which is the exact same situation that the Pacers were in this year, is why he was on the trade block so much for Russell Westbrook and some picks, because it's like you can't let him walk for nothing. And so I think Miles, he loves being in Indiana. He's honestly pretty great with Halliburton. I think he really showed a lot on the roll this year that is really impressive. And his defensive presence back there for a team that has atrocious point of attack defenders is extremely helpful. So I think that it's almost, I don't want to say a lock, but it's very, very likely that he's a Pacer all of next year with the same exact role. Nobody's coming for his minutes as they try to be good. And then the following year, I imagine that as the Pacers continue to grow, they'll still be trying to be pretty good. And Miles is going to be a huge part of that. So I don't see any change in his role in the next couple of years.
So him sticking around, potentially either adding, if they're lucky, Wemby, which I know would probably be really exciting for you, but either maybe even like a guy like Jarris Walker,
Yep.
somebody else, another big. Do we even still hold on to Isaiah Jackson, or is that pretty much in like Jalen
Oh
Smith? Like,
man,
how are we feeling about them?
I think you hold Isaiah Jackson because the stat set is just there. The field goal percentage is going to be elite. The blocks are going to be elite. The steals are going to be good. Like he's going to be a positive contributor in probably 6 categories. He just had an exit interview today where he's talking about working on his jump shot, his free throws, and his ball handling, which is great because that means he could potentially be more of a 4 than just a pure 5 that can't actually guard 5s because he doesn't weigh enough. So heading into his 3rd year, I was really excited about Isaiah Jackson this year, but I'm still holding him because what like at the worst case scenario is he stays on the Pacers and continues to get about 18 minutes a game. And then he keeps doing what he's doing and he's still very young and has some upside. And then he goes into restricted free agency. Worst case, or like another scenario is they trade him. He trade him as an asset to another team. And best case, they trade Jalen Smith and Isaiah Jackson's just the primary backup 5 getting 20 minutes a game. And then there you go. There's your fantasy asset. But yeah, I don't know. Jalen Smith is a hard one because they opened the year calling him the starting 4, which was just ridiculous for me. It was like that was one of the conditions for him to re-sign in Indy. I'm fairly confident of that. I don't know anything, but it's just like looking at it as like pretty sure that's part of it. And then obviously the season went a different direction. So, but I think Jalen Smith is showing enough to show that like he's an NBA player. At the very least, he can be a backup big. So both guys probably holding and just hoping that the ever-present roadblock of Indiana Pacers big man gets cleared up sooner rather than later.
At some point, but who knows? Maybe they'll just add another one in the draft and just keep making us wait. But yeah. With so Buddy Hield, wrong side of 30 now, just finished 48 in 9 cat per game value. At least his best season in a while. So last few years. Is he the other guy that's been consistently on the trade block? Is he sticking around to be a backcourt mate for Tyrese Halliburton for at least the next few years?
No, I don't think so. The Pacers have a glaring hole at the 4, and they only have so many salaries to trade out. And if they really want to see what Benedict Mathurin, Andrew Nembhard, and Tyrese Halliburton can do together, not to mention whoever they end up drafting, there's only so many shots to go around. There's only so many minutes to go around, which they've already struggled with the rotation this year because they had so many guards / like 2.5s. Like you kind of had to play Buddy Hield at the 3. You kind of had to play Chris Duarte at the 3. You kind of like Aaron Nesmith was fine as a 3, and you had to play him at the 4 because you didn't have any 4s and you had a ton of 2s and 3s. So that's just kind of how that worked. And so I would put it as more likely than not that Buddy Hield is not on the Indiana Pacers for opening night, and definitely not on the Pacers after the trade deadline in February of 2024. I don't know who for. I don't know what that's going to look like. It seems like the Pacers are thriving with the optionality is the buzzword, the optionality that they have moving into this offseason. And I think it's going to be a big one because the Halliburton extension doesn't kick in yet. So you have a ton of financial flex. They haven't signed it yet, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be a max in a couple months.
Probably.
There's a good chance. So the Halliburton extension will kick in next year, and that's when the team's going to get expensive. And so you've got one shot this summer to nail your draft pick, make some moves, and set yourself up for the next couple of years. And I don't see Buddy Hield being part of that.
And whatever team he ends up on, probably not going to see the same shot volume, probably going to end up on more of a contending team where he may even be in some sort of 6-man role or just some sort of probably 3rd scoring option at best. So he's probably not going to repeat as a 4th round value anytime soon.
Yeah, I think he's definitely going to be like inside the top 100 just because he gets enough 3s up that it's going to be a positive, and he just has the ball, so he gets some assists and he plays a decent amount of minutes. He gets a steal. So I don't see his value getting cratered if he goes somewhere else, but it definitely will not be in the top 50.
All right, and then Benedict Mathurin. I think I am pretty much on record for every single like shot creating shooting guard saying that they're going to be Bradley Beal. How good is he going to be? Because, I mean, just sticking with my comparison that I did for Jalen Green and now I've done for Mathurin, Beal averaged 32 seasons and was like late first, early second round value during those 2 seasons. Is Mathurin, assuming just sticking in kind of like that 2 or 3 role with Indiana alongside Halliburton, alongside Miles Turner for a couple seasons, how good can he get? Even if, and then I guess even further down the road, when he's probably like 5 years down the road, is he going to be able to reach that point of being perennial all-star starter, 30 points per game? Like, how lofty should my expectations be?
I think it really depends on how he develops his passing this summer and into next year, because his passing was pretty bad. I don't know. I haven't been able to tell if it was roll, if they were like, hey, buckets, nothing else. Go score, figure out your game at the NBA level as a scorer. You know Halliburton's going to be dealing with the ball as a starter, so you just go figure out how you score, and we'll figure everything else out later. But he had more turnovers and assists per game this year, which is obviously not what you want to see. But he also had a 47.7, like a 4.77 free throw rate, which is top 15 in the entire NBA this year. And I think only Luka, Zion, Embiid, Paolo, and Blake Griffin had free throw rates like that as rookies, which is just an absurd group to be a part of. Yeah, like I'm not saying he's going to be up there because obviously he doesn't have the defensive stats for a couple of those or just the insane volume passing for a couple others. But the way he attacks the rim is just unlike anything we've seen from a rookie in a very long time, other than Paolo, who also did that this year, who's also top 15. But Mathurin's expectations for me, I can see him being like a sort of like what would a Zach LaVine look like, but with slightly worse passing? Like what does that look like? You know what I mean? Because he's like 22, 5-5, something like that, or 25, 5-5, I guess.
Yeah.
I can see Mathurin being up in that range. He didn't shoot super great from 3, but I imagine as strong and as physical as he is, drawing fouls, he's just going to continue getting stronger as he increases finishing. He's going to be more comfortable attacking the rim. That's more free throw volume. He shot 83% this year. I think he's going to be a good fantasy player, and he got 0.6 steals in 28.5 minutes. I think that came from a lot of inattentiveness on defense as an off-ball defender. And he talked about that exit interview, and it was something that all of us Pacers people were looking at. I was like, dude, he is atrocious as an off-ball defender. Like, he's pretty good on ball. Like, he's so competitive that he takes that matchup very seriously when he's in it. But he's like, oh, hey, look, back cut, done. Like, not even, he's just like both feet planted, didn't even see it coming, and the guy's in there for a dunk. So I think as that increases, obviously you play more minutes, you get some different defensive assignments. He prides himself in being competitive, and so I imagine he's going to develop that. But you start paying attention more off ball, you're going to get a steal. Like the list of players who don't end up with like around a steal, playing 32 to 35 minutes a game, is very small. And I just see Mathurin has the tools to do that. I think it'll just be a matter of his passing going up to another level to be something more than just a high volume scorer that kind of relies on efficiency from the field that's going to fluctuate his fantasy value a ton if he can't figure out the auxiliary stats like assists and steals and blocks.
So he's averaging 25, 5 and 5. Halliburton's averaging 20 and 10. We add in Victor Wembanyama. We still keep Miles Turner. How quickly am I buying finals tickets for the Pacers?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to be looking up the odds to see what the Pacers' futures are on the finals next year already. I don't know if they're posted, but I'm just going to reach out to DraftKings or something and figure out a way to get in there. But no, it'll be pretty interesting to see how Mathurin fits in more with Halliburton, because his usage when Halliburton was on the floor was not great. And so I think Mathurin's very much a rhythm player, and so I think it's going to take some getting used to playing alongside a guy that is as ball dominant as Halliburton. Even though he is creating so many shots, I think Mathurin really likes to be in the flow of his offense, and so being able to have the ball in his hands and make decisions quicker, not relying on just dribbling into his moves will be huge for him next year.
Yeah. So that's 3 teams that we've talked about for Dynasty. That's going to do it for those 3 teams. Before we go, Rhett, you talked earlier about starting the Punt Intended podcast and then just kind of reaching out to Dan, getting involved with SportsEthos. As a kind of Dynasty content creator, but really just like a content creator in the fantasy space, what advice would you give to people that would be interested in just kind of, I guess, starting to create content?
Start creating content, like just start doing it and putting stuff out there, because once you start doing that, people like me and people like you and people like everybody else in the fantasy space, but especially Dynasty space, we're going to see it. Dynasty is not a very big community, and there are very few people creating Dynasty, which is why SportsEthos was so psyched when I wanted to do it. Like, wait, people want to do that? Like, yes, yes, people want to do that, and they actually want to consume it as well. It's crazy. So yeah, just start doing it. And I think obviously finding how you watch the game and presenting that in a way that's different than everybody else is going to be important, but that also requires that you watch the games, because that's one thing that I feel like a lot of Dynasty people can get too focused on, is like, oh my gosh, his per 36 is insane. It's like, yeah, but he doesn't play 36 minutes because he's not actually good at basketball. Like, yeah, Christian Wood is not an elite Dynasty asset. I'm sorry. He's not actually good. None of his teams want to keep him when it comes time to make that decision. So, like if there's 5 teams that don't want him,
so there's a reason he was coming off the bench in Dallas.
I don't know. Could be. What do I know? I just watch the games and see him get roasted on defense all the time. So yeah, it's just finding a way to put your spin on what you're seeing and kind of trying to find that balance between, like, okay, here's what the stats are telling me, because obviously 9-cat, you're looking at very few things that contribute to winning, but here's what the film is telling me. And that's why I felt optimistic buying a guy like Benedict Mathurin, despite his 9-cat being very unfriendly right now, and why I felt really good moving a guy like D'Lo to make it happen, because obviously a career year for D'Lo. And it's like, D'Lo's not good. He's not actually a good basketball player that contributes to winning teams. Obviously, playing next to LeBron and AD might change that, but it's just stuff like that, where it's like, I just have strong opinions on guys that I watch. I'm like, man, they do a lot of really dumb stuff, and I don't imagine that's going to go super great. So yeah, just start doing it and reach out to me. I'll take a look at everything. If you want any sort of feedback or just to repost it anywhere, I'd love to do that. Yeah,
whether it's Dynasty basketball, whether it's just 1-year leagues, whether it's fantasy football, whether it's fantasy Premier League, Rhett will retweet it. He'll give you his opinion on fantasy Premier League. I wouldn't necessarily trust it. I don't know. Should we trust your opinion on fantasy Premier League?
If you ask me a question, I'm going to put some research into trying to figure it out. So I'll at least have like a quick Google result to give you some sort of feedback.
There we go.
I'll be parroting what somebody else says, but at least it's something good.
A screenshot from somebody else's post, but
exactly,
you will get a response. And if you create any work, Rhett said he'll retweet it, he'll share it. Find him on Twitter at Rhett_Bauer, or just follow the Punt Intended podcast. Do you have anything coming up that we should be looking out for?
Yeah, I've got an episode of Pun Intended coming out reviewing all 7 of my Dynasty leagues this year. I had 9. I dropped 2 of them. So it was way too many. So I'm reviewing I did in all 7 of my Dynasty leagues, my best and worst trades from all of those leagues. So I had a lot of fun doing it. So I hope that people will listen to that. And then I got some Pacers stuff coming out as well. I'm working on what they should want at the power forward spot, whether through the draft or through other transactions. And then I am on Locked On Pacers a couple times, looking at just what the Pacers offseason might look like. So just check out all my stuff on Twitter.
Sweet. Well, I'll definitely be checking that out. Rhett, thanks for hopping on and talking about the Hornets and Blazers a little bit, and then talking Pacers with me. It was a lot of fun.
Of course. Yeah, I'll appreciate it.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for episode 2 of the Tank Me Later podcast.